The scent of whiskey and cigarette smoke clung to my hair as I balanced 3 plates on my forearm, weaving through the dim lighting of the velvet hour. My feet ached in the second-hand heels I'd bought from a thrift store, 3 inches too high for comfort, but perfect for the tips that kept a roof over our heads. My daughter Emma's medication wasn't going to pay for itself. "Table 7 needs another round," Marco called from behind the bar, barely audible over the jazz quartet playing in the corner. The saxophonist's melancholy notes seemed to mirror the exhaustion that had settled deep in my bones. "I've got it," I replied, forcing a smile that didn't reach my eyes. I'd mastered that particular skill over the past 3 years, since David left us with nothing but debt and broken promises. The Velvet Hour wasn't the kind of place I'd imagined working when I was younger, dreaming of becoming a nurse. It sat on the edge of downtown, where the glittering high-rises gave way to older buildings with character and secrets. The clientele was a mix of business people winding down, couples on dates, and the occasional group that spoke in hushed tones in the corner booths. The owner, an older Italian man named Gino, ran it with military precision, but paid well and never questioned when I needed to leave early for Emma's school events. I delivered the drinks to a rowdy group of men in suits, ignoring their appraising glances as I set down their whiskeys. One of them, accidentally, brushed his hand against mine, and I pulled away without acknowledging it. The bills they left as tips were what mattered, not their temporary attention. As I turned back toward the bar, I felt it again. That peculiar sensation of being watched. It had been happening for weeks now, a prickle at the nape of my neck that made my skin tighten. My eyes drifted automatically to table 13 in the corner. He was there again. Always the same table, always Tuesday through Friday. The man sat with his back to the wall, facing the entrance. I'd never seen someone so still, so contained, yet somehow occupying more space than his physical body should allow. His suit was impeccably tailored, charcoal gray tonight over a black shirt, no tie, no flashy jewelry or watches, just a simple silver signet ring on his right hand. He was older than me, maybe late 30s, with dark hair graying slightly at the temples, and a jaw that looked like it had been carved from stone. Unlike the other men who came to the bar, he never openly stared at the waitresses. Yet somehow, I always knew when his eyes were on me, like now. I quickly looked away, focusing on wiping down an empty table. His presence made the air feel thicker, charged with something I couldn't name. He rarely spoke above a murmur, but when he did, people listened. They came to him, men in similar expensive suits, women dressed to impress. And they always left looking either relieved or worried. No in between. "Lily." Marco's voice startled me. "Table 13 wants another Macallan, the 25-year. My stomach tightened. In the 3 months I'd worked here, I'd never served his table. Gino always handled him personally, or Marco did. I glanced toward the bar, where Gino was deep in conversation with someone on the phone, his brow furrowed in concern. "Are you sure?" I asked. Marco nodded, already preparing the whiskey. "He asked for you specifically." A chill ran through me despite the warmth of the crowded room. He asked for me, by name. I took the crystal tumbler, feeling its weight in my palm as I carefully navigated through the tables. My heart hammered against my ribs, and I silently cursed myself for the reaction. He was just another customer, a regular who tipped well and kept to himself. Nothing to be nervous about. As I approached, I noticed for the first time that he wasn't alone. A large man sat at the adjacent table, his broad shoulders straining against his suit jacket. He wasn't drinking, just watching the room with alert eyes. A bodyguard. The realization made me falter slightly, nearly sloshing the expensive whiskey. When I reached table 13, I carefully set down the drink on a fresh coaster. "You're Macallan, sir," I said, pleased that my voice remained steady. "Thank you, Lily." His voice was deep and smooth, with the barest hint of an accent I couldn't place. Not Italian. Something Eastern European, maybe. I froze at the sound of my name on his lips. Up close, I could see his eyes were a shade of brown, so dark they appeared almost black, framed by lashes any woman would envy. A thin scar ran along his jawline, barely noticeable unless you were standing as close as I was. You're welcome, I managed, turning to leave. You look tired tonight. The observation stopped me in my tracks. I turned back, unsure how to respond to such direct personal comment from a customer. I'm fine, thank you, I said automatically. He studied me, and I had the unsettling feeling he could see every worry line on my face, every frayed thread on my uniform, every secret I kept. Your daughter. She is unwell again? My blood ran cold. How could he possibly know about Emma? I'd never mentioned her at work. It was a rule I had, keeping my home life separate from this place. I began, but he cut me off with a slight raise of his hand. Gino mentioned it. He speaks highly of you, a dedicated mother. Relief flooded through me, followed immediately by suspicion. Why would Gino discuss my personal life with a customer? She's better now, I said cautiously. Thank you for asking. He nodded, taking a sip of his whiskey. Children are resilient, but their medical care is expensive in this country. It wasn't a question, but I found myself answering anyway. Yes, it is. Sit. He gestured to the chair across from him. Just for a moment. Every instinct told me to politely refuse and walk away, but there was something in his tone, not a command, but not quite a request either, and curiosity, that dangerous thing, made me hesitate. I'm working, I explained, glancing toward the bar where Marco was watching us with poorly disguised interest. The man followed my gaze and made an almost imperceptible nod. Seconds later, Marco turned away, suddenly busy with wiping glasses. 5 minutes, he said, his eyes returning to mine. Please. The please seemed out of place, an afterthought from someone unaccustomed to asking for things. I lowered myself into the chair, perching on the edge, ready to stand at any moment. My name is Alexander Volkov, he said, setting down his glass. You've been working here for 3 months and 2 days. I blinked, unnerved by his precision. Yes. Before that, you worked at the grill on 5th for almost a year, and before that, the diner on Westmore. My palms began to sweat. How do you know that? He ignored my question. You're raising your daughter alone. Her father left when she was 2. You work 2 jobs to afford her treatments. The apartment on Maple Street is small, but you keep it spotless. Fear clawed its way up my throat. I started to stand. I should get back. You have nothing to fear from me, Lily, he said quietly. On the contrary. Then why do you know so much about me? I demanded, finding a spark of anger through my fear. Have you been following me? A ghost of a smile touched his lips, there and gone so quickly I might have imagined it. I make it my business to know about people who interest me. I'm not interesting, I said firmly. I'm a waitress and a mom, that's all. And yet, he said, his eyes never leaving mine. Here we are. The jazz music swelled around us, filling the awkward silence. I should have been terrified, but something in his manner kept me rooted to my seat. He wasn't threatening me, at least not overtly, but the power he exuded, the casual way he'd revealed how much he knew about my life, told me this was a man accustomed to control. What do you want from me, Mr. Volkov? I asked finally. He leaned back slightly, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. For now? Nothing. I simply wanted to introduce myself properly. We've been sharing this space for months. It seemed time. I didn't believe him for a second. Men like him, whatever kind of man he was, didn't do anything without purpose. Well, now we've been introduced, I said, rising from my chair. If there's nothing else, your daughter, he said, stopping me again. Emma. She has chronic asthma, yes, and allergies that complicate her condition. I stiffened. Yes. There's a specialist at Northside Medical, Dr. Abramson. One of the best in the country for pediatric respiratory conditions. He reached into his suit jacket and produced a business card, sliding it across the table. I took the liberty of making an appointment. Next Tuesday, 4 o'clock. I stared at the card, not touching it. Why would you do that? Because you need it, and I can provide it. And what do you want in return? My voice had hardened. I knew how the world worked. Nothing came for free, especially from strange men who watched you from corner tables. Something flickered in his dark eyes. Approval, perhaps. Smart question. But not everything is a transaction, Lily. In my experience, it usually is. He inclined his head slightly, acknowledging the point. Let's call it a gesture of goodwill. No strings attached. I didn't move to take the card. I can take care of my daughter myself. Of course you can. You've been doing an admirable job under difficult circumstances. He pushed the card closer to me, but everyone needs help occasionally. Even you. Before I could respond, a commotion near the entrance drew our attention. A group of loud men stumbled in, already intoxicated. One of them knocked into a server, sending a tray of drinks crashing to the floor. When I turned back, Alexander was watching the scene with a coldness that hadn't been there moments before. His bodyguard had shifted positions, now half standing, one hand inside his jacket. You should return to work, Alexander said, his tone dismissive. Think about the appointment, for Emma's sake. I hesitated, then quickly took the card, slipping it into my pocket. Not a commitment, just keeping my options open. For Emma. As I walked away, the weight of his gaze followed me across the room. Whatever game he was playing, I had just unwittingly become a piece on his board. The rest of my shift passed in a blur. I moved automatically between tables, taking orders, delivering drinks, collecting tips, all while feeling those dark eyes tracking my movements. When I glanced at table 13 again an hour later, he was gone. The only evidence of his presence a generous tip, and the lingering scent of expensive cologne. At 2 a.m, I finally hung up my apron. The night air was cool against my skin as I stepped out the back door into the alley where employees parked. My ancient Honda sat under the single flickering light, looking even more decrepit than usual. As I fumbled for my keys, the shadows at the far end of the alley shifted. I froze, keys clutched between my fingers as a makeshift weapon, heart racing. A sleek black car idled there, its engine a quiet purr in the night. The rear window lowered smoothly, revealing Alexander's profile. "Allow me to drive you home, Lily," he called, his voice carrying easily in the quiet alley. "It's late." I didn't move. "I have my car. It can stay here tonight. Marco will ensure it's safe." As if on cue, Marco appeared in the doorway behind me. "It's okay, Lily. Mr. Volkov is a friend of the establishment." The way he said friend told me everything I needed to know. Whoever Alexander Volkov was, he held power here. Power that extended beyond the walls of the Velvet Hour. I stood frozen between my car and his, caught in a moment of decision. Every warning my mother had ever given me screamed to get in my own car and drive away, but the card in my pocket felt impossibly heavy, a promise of help for Emma that I couldn't easily dismiss. "Just a ride home," Alexander said, reading my hesitation. Nothing more. I took one step toward his car, then another, ignoring every instinct telling me to run. As I approached, the door opened from within, revealing the plush leather interior and Alexander's impassive face. "After you," he said. I slid into the back seat, the scent of leather and his cologne enveloping me. As the door closed with a soft thud, I realized I had just made a choice that could change everything. I just didn't know yet if it was for better or for worse. The car's interior was silent, except for the subtle hum of the engine. I sat with my hands folded tightly in my lap, acutely aware of the man beside me. Alexander hadn't spoken since I'd entered the vehicle, his attention focused on the phone in his hand. The driver, a broad-shouldered man with a closely cropped haircut, navigated through the empty streets without asking for directions. "You know where I live?" I said finally, breaking the silence. It wasn't a question. Alexander looked up from his phone. "Yes." "Is that supposed to make me feel comfortable?" The corner of his mouth twitched, almost a smile. "No, but honesty between us seems preferable to pretense." Streetlights cast rhythmic patterns of light and shadow across his face as we drove. In these flashes, I noticed details I'd missed in the dim lighting of the bar. A small nick above his eyebrow, the faint lines at the corners of his eyes, the perfect straightness of his nose. "Who are you, really?" I asked, emboldened by the enclosed space and the late hour. "And don't just tell me your name again." He studied me for a moment, tucking his phone away inside his jacket. "I'm a businessman with interests throughout the city. Import, export, real estate, private lending. And that requires a bodyguard? In my position, Certain precautions are necessary. I glanced toward the driver, wondering if he was another precaution. As if sensing my thoughts, Alexander added, Dmitri has been with me for 15 years. He's very good at his job. Dmitri's eyes briefly met mine in the rear-view mirror, expressionless, before returning to the road. The velvet hour, I said, connecting pieces together. Gino works for you, doesn't he? That's why he treats you differently. Gino is an old friend, Alexander corrected. He runs his business, I run mine. We help each other when necessary. The careful way he phrased it told me I was right, even if the specifics were wrong. I turned to look out the window, watching as we passed through my neighborhood. The buildings here were older, worn around the edges, but still dignified. Nothing like the sleek downtown district where the Velvet Hour stood. The car slowed to a stop in front of my apartment building, a 3-story brick structure with window boxes that some residents used for flowers in warmer months. Now they sat empty, waiting for spring. Thank you for the ride, I said, reaching for the door handle. I'll walk you to your door, Alexander stated, already exiting on his side. Before I could protest, he was opening my door, extending his hand to help me out. I hesitated, then took it, feeling the warmth and strength of his fingers around mine. The simple contact sent an unexpected current through me, and I quickly pulled my hand away once I was standing. Dmitri remained in the car, engine running, but his vigilant eyes scanned the darkened street continuously. Alexander walked beside me to the entrance, his pace matching mine. He moved with a fluid grace that seemed at odds with his powerful build. At the front door, I fumbled with my keys, painfully aware of his presence just inches away. Emma is with your mother tonight? He asked. I froze, key halfway to the lock. Yes, I answered, unable to keep the edge from my voice. Do you know her schedule too, only that she wasn't at your apartment when I arrived at the Velvet Hour tonight? The implication that he had been watching my home made my skin crawl, yet I pushed the door open and stepped inside. He followed, uninvited. The entryway was dimly lit, the building's superintendent perpetually slow to replace burnt-out bulbs. The elevator had been out of order for months, so I turned toward the stairs. Alexander followed, his footsteps eerily quiet behind me. Third floor, I said unnecessarily, since he probably knew that too. We climbed in silence. By the second-floor landing, I was slightly winded from the long day and late hour. Alexander showed no sign of exertion, watching me with those dark, unreadable eyes. Why are you doing this? I asked abruptly, pausing on the stairs. The specialist appointment, the ride home. What do you really want? He took a step closer, and I instinctively moved back until my shoulders touched the wall. He didn't crowd me, maintaining just enough distance to be proper, but his presence seemed to fill the narrow stairwell. I told you, not everything is a transaction, but this is. It has to be. Men like you don't just help people like me without reason. Men like me? His eyebrow lifted slightly. And what kind of man am I, Lily? Dangerous. My mind whispered. Powerful. Something else I couldn't quite name. I don't know, I admitted. That's what scares me. He nodded, as if my fear was reasonable, expected. You're right to be cautious. The world isn't kind to single mothers with sick children. Emma isn't sick, I corrected automatically, defensively. She has a condition that's manageable. A condition that keeps you working double shifts and still barely covering the bills. His voice wasn't judgmental, just matter of fact. A condition that could be better treated with specialized care you can't afford. I pushed away from the wall, continuing up the stairs. I'm handling it. I know you are, he replied, following me. Your determination is admirable. We reached my door at the end of the third-floor hallway. I turned to face him, key clutched tightly in my hand. Thank you for the ride, and the card. I'll think about it. He reached into his pocket and pulled out another card. This one plain white with just a phone number embossed in black. My private line. If you need anything at all, call this number, day or night. I took the card, our fingers brushing. I won't need it. Keep it anyway. The intensity in his gaze made me look away. I quickly unlocked my door, stepping inside the small apartment that smelled of the cinnamon candles I burned to mask the lingering mustiness of the old building. To my surprise, he didn't try to follow me in. Instead, he remained in the hallway, hands now tucked into his pockets. "Good night, Lily," he said, his voice softer than I'd heard it before. "Good night, Mr. Volkov. Alexander," he corrected. "Alexander," I repeated, the name feeling foreign on my tongue. He inclined his head slightly, then turned and walked back toward the stairs. I closed the door quickly, engaging both locks, and leaned back against it, exhaling a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. The apartment was quiet and dark, empty without Emma's presence. I moved through the rooms, turning on lights, checking windows, trying to shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted in my life. In my bedroom, I emptied my pockets onto the nightstand. Tips from the night, my phone, a tube of lip balm, and the 2 cards, the doctor's appointment and Alexander's number. I stared at them, wondering what invisible strings might be attached. I showered quickly, washing away the smell of the bar, and pulled on an old t-shirt and shorts to sleep in. As I was about to turn off the light, my phone buzzed with a text message. "Unknown. Check your email." I frowned, not recognizing the number. As I debated whether to respond, another message came through. "Unknown. It's Alexander." My heart skipped. How had he gotten my number? I hadn't given it to him. The question was silly, I realized immediately. He knew where I lived, where I worked, about Emma's condition. Of course he had my phone number. "Me. How did you get my number?" His response came instantly. "Alexander. The same way I got your email address. Check it, please." The please again. That awkward courtesy that seemed almost an afterthought. I hesitated, then reached for my laptop at the foot of the bed. It was an older model, slow to start up, the fan whirring loudly in the quiet room. When I opened my email, there was a new message at the top of my inbox from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line read simply, "Emma." Inside was a brief message. "I've taken the liberty of transferring funds to cover the specialist appointment and any follow-up treatment required. The account information is attached. This is not charity or a loan. Consider it an investment in your daughter's future, Alexander." Attached was a PDF document with details of a new bank account, in my name, with a balance that made me gasp. It was more money than I made in 6 months at both my jobs combined. My phone buzzed again. "Alexander, did you receive it?" My fingers trembled as I typed a response. "Me, I can't accept this. It's too much." "Alexander, you can, you will, for Emma." "Me, why are you doing this?" There was a longer pause before his reply came through. "Alexander, get some rest, Lily. We'll talk soon." I stared at the screen, waiting for more, but no further messages came. I set the phone down and looked at the laptop screen again, at the numbers that could solve so many of my immediate problems, the money that could get Emma the care she needed, ease the constant worry about making rent, maybe even allow me to cut back on shifts and spend more time with her. All from a man I barely knew who watched me from table 13 and somehow knew details about my life he had no business knowing. I closed the laptop without accepting or rejecting the offer. Sleep eluded me that night as I stared at the ceiling, my thoughts circling endlessly around dark eyes, an account balance with too many zeros, and the question that kept repeating, what does he really want? The next morning came too quickly. I picked up Emma from my mother's small house on the edge of town, greeting her with extra fierce hugs to compensate for the night away. "Did you have fun with Grandma?" I asked, smoothing her dark curls away from her forehead, checking automatically for the flush that sometimes preceded an asthma attack. Emma nodded, her 7-year-old face serious as always. "We made cookies and watched a movie about dolphins." She studied me with eyes too perceptive for her age. "You look tired, Mommy. Just work, sweetie," I assured her, leading her to the car. "Let's go home." As we drove, Emma chattered about her night, about school, about the science project she was working on. I responded automatically, my mind still caught in the web of last night's encounter. When we pulled into our usual parking spot behind the apartment building, I noticed a sleek black SUV parked nearby. My heartbeat quickened as I scanned the area, but there was no sign of Alexander or his driver. "Come on, baby," I said, helping Emma from the car and hurrying her toward the building entrance. In the mailbox in the lobby was a small package addressed to Emma. No return address, no postmark. It had been delivered by hand. "Is that for me?" Emma asked excitedly. "Let's take it upstairs first," I said, tucking it under my arm as we climbed the stairs. In our apartment, with the door locked behind us, I examined the package carefully. It was lightweight, wrapped in simple brown paper. After a moment's hesitation, I carefully opened it while Emma watched impatiently. Inside was an inhaler, not the generic brand covered by our insurance. But the premium version the doctor had mentioned was more effective, but cost 3 times as much. Alongside it was a handwritten note on heavy cream stationery. "For emergencies. Use it well, little one. A friend." "Is it from Daddy?" Emma asked, her voice small. My heart clenched. "No, sweetie. Just a friend who knows you need it." Emma accepted this with a child's simple faith, taking the inhaler with reverent hands. "It's so much prettier than my other one." I watched her examine it, torn between gratitude and unease. How had he known exactly which medication to send? What doctor had he spoken to? What records had he accessed? And more importantly, what would he ask for in return? The next few days passed in a strange fog of normalcy and tension. I worked my morning shift at the diner, picked Emma up from school, helped with homework, made dinner, and read her bedtime stories. After she fell asleep, I would stare at my laptop screen, at the bank account I still hadn't touched, at the specialist appointment card on my nightstand. Alexander hadn't contacted me again since that night. When I returned to the Velvet Hour for my evening shifts, table 13 remained conspicuously empty. Gino watched me with curious eyes but asked no questions, and Marco studiously avoided any mention of my ride home. By Friday night, I had nearly convinced myself it had been some strange, stress-induced hallucination, until I saw the black SUV parked across the street from the bar as I arrived for my shift. It didn't move all evening, and though I couldn't see through the tinted windows, I felt the weight of surveillance with every step I took. "You look jumpy tonight," Gino commented as I nervously dropped a stack of clean glasses in the back room. "Sorry," I murmured, bending to clean up the shards. "Just tired." Gino's weathered face creased with concern. "He's not a bad man, Lily." I froze, a jagged piece of glass between my fingers. "Who?" "Don't play dumb, girl. It doesn't suit you." Gino squatted beside me, his knees cracking with the effort. He took the dustpan from my hand. "Alexander Volkov is many things, but cruel to women and children isn't one of them." I sat back on my heels. "What exactly is he, Gino? Because I've been getting some mixed signals." Gino glanced toward the door, lowering his voice. "He's a man who protects what he considers his. A man who remembers both favors and slights. A man who—" He paused, searching for words. "A man who makes his own rules in a world that would crush people like you and me." That doesn't really answer my question. It's the only answer I can give. He patted my shoulder awkwardly. "Just know that if he's taken an interest in you, there's a reason, and it might not be what you fear." His words followed me throughout my shift. An enigmatic warning. Or was it reassurance that left me more confused than ever? At midnight, during my break, I finally gathered the courage to call the number on Alexander's card. It rang 3 times before he answered, his voice instantly recognizable. "Lily." Not a question. He knew exactly who was calling. "How did you know what inhaler Emma needed?" I asked without preamble. There was a pause, the sound of a door closing on his end. "I have access to resources." "That's not an answer. It's the one I'm giving you tonight." His tone softened slightly. "Has she used it?" "No. Her regular one has been working fine." I leaned against the wall in the empty break room, phone pressed tightly to my ear. "I haven't touched the money either." "I know." Of course he did. "Tuesday is the appointment with Dr. Abramson. I'm going to take her." "Good." I could hear the satisfaction in that single word. "But I want to know why," I insisted. "No more vague answers about investments or goodwill. Why Emma? Why me?" Silence stretched between us, and for a moment I thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was lower, more intimate somehow. 3 months ago, I was at the Velvet Hour when a little girl had an asthma attack near the kitchen. My breath caught. "You saw that?" "I did." The staff wasn't supposed to have children there. But your babysitter had canceled, and Gino made an exception. You were so calm, administering her medication, soothing her while she struggled to breathe. When it was over, you wiped her tears, then your own, and went back to work. I remembered that night vividly. The terror as Emma's airways constricted. The helplessness as I counted seconds between puffs of her inhaler. The relief when the attack subsided. I hadn't realized anyone had noticed besides Gino. That doesn't explain your interest, doesn't it? Something in his voice shifted, became harder to read. I admire resilience, Lily. Strength under pressure. Loyalty. You showed all three that night. So this is... what? Admiration? For now. The words hung in the air between us, loaded with implication. I need to get back to work, I said finally. Of course. But Lily... He paused. After your shift. I'll be waiting. The line went dead before I could respond. I stared at my phone, a shiver running through me that wasn't entirely fear. The rest of the night passed in a blur of orders and practiced smiles. At 2 o'clock, as I hung up my apron, I knew what, or rather who, awaited me outside. Part of me considered leaving through the front entrance instead, avoiding whatever conversation Alexander wanted to have, but curiosity, that dangerous impulse again, propelled me through the back door into the alley. The black SUV idled in exactly the same spot as before. This time, when the window lowered, Alexander didn't speak, just opened the door in silent invitation. I approached slowly, still uncertain, then slid into the back seat beside him. The door closed with a soft click that felt oddly final. "Where's your bodyguard tonight?" I asked, noticing that the driver wasn't Dimitri, but another man, younger, with sharp eyes that watched me in the rearview mirror. Attending to other matters, Alexander's gaze swept over me, taking in my wrinkled uniform, my hair falling loose from its ponytail after the long shift. "You worked hard tonight." It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. "Friday nights are busy. Yet you still took time to help the young couple in the corner booth decide on their first anniversary cocktails. And you slipped an extra olive into the old man's martini, Mr. Grayson, I believe, without charging him." My eyes widened. "You weren't even there tonight. As I said, I have resources." He gestured to the driver. Nikolai has been keeping an eye on things in my absence. The realization that I'd been watched all night, perhaps all week, made me tense. That's disturbing. Is it? I find it reassuring to know what happens in places that matter to me, and I matter to you, I said flatly, because you saw me handle an asthma attack. His lips curved slightly, among other reasons. Such as? Instead of answering, he reached inside his jacket and produced a slim folder. "Your ex-husband, David Miller, 34 years old, left you and your daughter 3 years ago. Currently living in Phoenix with his new wife, a real estate agent named Cynthia. No contact, no child support payments for the past 2 years. I stiffened, my hands balling into fists on my lap. How? He owes you approximately $47,000 in back support payments, not counting interest. Alexander continued as if I hadn't spoken. He claimed bankruptcy last year after a failed business venture, but mysteriously maintained his membership at an exclusive golf club and leased a new car 3 months later. Hot tears pricked at the corners of my eyes. Not sadness, but anger that had simmered for years. Why are you telling me this? To remind me what a fool I was? Alexander's expression hardened. To remind you what kind of man abandons his child. What kind of man leaves a woman to shoulder his responsibilities. He set the folder between us on the seat. And to let you know that as of this morning, Mr. Miller has had a change of heart regarding his paternal obligations. I stared at him, uncomprehending. What did you do? Nothing illegal, if that concerns you. Let's just say I arranged for him to understand certain consequences of continued neglect. He tapped the folder with one finger. You'll receive the first payment on Monday. He'll continue paying monthly, with additional installments to cover the backlog gradually. I opened the folder with trembling fingers, finding legal documents I only half understood, but clearly showing a payment arrangement for child support with David's signature at the bottom. It looked genuine. You threatened him, I whispered. I presented options and allowed him to choose the sensible one. Alexander watched me closely. Does this upset you? That I intervened? Did it? The money would make a tremendous difference for Emma. It was rightfully hers, what her father should have been providing all along. Yet the method of obtaining it, I don't know how to feel, I admitted, closing the folder. Grateful, disturbed, both, I think. He nodded, accepting this complex reaction without offense. Understandable. But know this, Lily, I did not harm him. I merely corrected an injustice. The car had been moving throughout our conversation, and I suddenly realized we weren't heading toward my apartment. The glittering lights of downtown surrounded us. Upscale restaurants and clubs still busy despite the late hour. Where are we going? I asked, glancing out the window. I thought you might be hungry after your shift. I know a place that serves excellent food at all hours. My stomach chose that moment to growl audibly, reminding me I'd skipped dinner in my rush to get Emma to my mother's before my shift. I flushed with embarrassment. I'm not exactly dressed for a nice restaurant. I gestured to my work clothes. Where we're going, that won't matter. He studied me for a moment. Unless you'd prefer to go home. I should say yes. I knew that. Go home. Put distance between myself and this dangerous man who threatened my ex-husband and created bank accounts without my permission. But the events of the night had left me off balance, curious, and, if I was honest, a little thrilled by the unexpected turn my ordinary life had taken. I am hungry, I conceded. Something like satisfaction flickered in his eyes. Good. The car turned down a side street, then into an alley behind what looked like an upscale apartment building. We stopped at a service entrance where a uniformed attendant immediately opened Alexander's door, then mine. Mr. Volkov, the man greeted with a respectful nod, not even glancing at my waitress uniform or messy hair. Alexander guided me inside with a light touch at my lower back, his hand radiating warmth through the thin material of my shirt. We entered a service elevator that required a key card, which Alexander produced from his pocket. You live here? I asked, as the elevator ascended swiftly. One of my residences, he replied. The elevator opened directly into a vast penthouse apartment, its windows offering a panoramic view of the city lights. The space was elegantly furnished in shades of charcoal, navy, and cream. Masculine but not severe, luxurious, without being ostentatious. You're bringing me to your home? I couldn't keep the apprehension from my voice. Alexander stepped away, giving me space. I have a private chef who makes the best beef stroganoff in the city, available whenever I require it. He gestured toward what appeared to be a dining room. We can eat and talk without interruption. Nothing more. I hesitated, then nodded cautiously. All right. He led me into the dining room, where a table was already set for two, candles lit, wine breathing in a crystal decanter. As if on cue, a door to what I assumed was the kitchen opened, and an older man in chef's whites emerged. Mr. Volkov, the meal is ready when you are. Thank you, Anton. We'll serve ourselves. You may go. The chef nodded, casting a curious glance my way before departing through a side door. You were very confident I'd say yes to dinner, I observed, nodding at the prepared table. Alexander pulled out a chair for me. I like to be prepared for all possibilities. As I sat, taking in the fine china and crystal before me, I couldn't help but laugh softly at the absurdity of it all. 24 hours ago, I was heating up mac and cheese for Emma's dinner. He took the seat across from me, his movements fluid and graceful for such a powerful man. And now you're dining in a penthouse with a man you're not sure you should trust. Should I? Trust you. He poured wine into my glass, then his own. Trust is earned over time, Lily. But I give you my word. I mean no harm to you or your daughter. Quite the opposite. What exactly do you mean, then? His dark eyes held mine. Protection. Security. A life where you don't have to count every dollar or work yourself to exhaustion. He lifted his glass slightly. If you'll allow it. In exchange for what? I asked. The question that had been burning in my mind since that first night. For now, dinner conversation. The rest... He smiled. A real smile that transformed his severe features, making him look younger, almost boyishly charming. The rest we'll discover together. I raised my own glass, my heart beating an unfamiliar rhythm. To discoveries, then. As our glasses clinked, I knew I was stepping onto a path that could change everything. What I didn't yet know was whether it would lead to salvation or destruction. The food was exquisite, rich, savory beef in a sauce that tasted of butter and history, served over handmade noodles that melted on my tongue. I tried to eat with dignity, to remember my manners in this opulent setting, but after the first few bites, hunger overcame propriety. Alexander watched me with undisguised pleasure, his own plate barely touched. "You enjoy it." I nodded, swallowing a bite. "It's amazing. I've never had stroganoff like this. Anton trained in St. Petersburg before the Soviet Union fell. His family has made this dish for generations." He finally took a bite of his own food. Food should be appreciated, savored. "You've been surviving on convenience for too long." The observation, though accurate, stung slightly. When you're a single parent working 2 jobs, convenience becomes necessary. Of course. He inclined his head in acknowledgement. "I didn't mean to criticize, merely to observe that you deserve better." I set down my fork, suddenly self-conscious. Why me, Alexander? Really, there must be a reason beyond watching me handle an asthma attack or admiring my resilience. Men like you don't notice women like me without a reason. He considered me over the rim of his wineglass. Men like me? Powerful, wealthy, connected. I gestured around us at the penthouse. "Whatever it is you really do, it's clearly lucrative and important enough to require bodyguards and surveillance. And women like you? Ordinary, struggling, single mothers with more responsibilities than resources." His expression shifted subtly, a fleeting shadow passing over his features. "Perhaps I recognized something in you that reminded me of someone I once knew." "Who?" "My mother." He set down his glass, fingers tracing the stem absently. "She raised my brother and me alone in post-Soviet Russia, worked 3 jobs, went hungry so we could eat, wore the same clothes for years. Her hands were always raw from cleaning other people's homes, but somehow still soft when she stroked our hair at night. The unexpected glimpse into his past caught me off guard. What happened to her?" "She died when I was 12. Pneumonia that went untreated because medicine was expensive and doctors required bribes we couldn't afford." His voice remained steady, but I caught the flicker of old pain in his eyes. "My brother and I were separated after that. Foster homes, then the streets. We survived as children do." "I'm sorry," I said, meaning it. He dismissed the sympathy with a slight gesture. "Ancient history, but perhaps it explains why I noticed you that night with Emma, that same calm determination in a crisis, the willingness to sacrifice." His eyes met mine, intense and direct. "The difference is, your daughter won't lose her mother to something preventable, and she won't be left to the mercy of a system that doesn't care if she lives or dies." A chill ran through me, despite the warmth of the room. "Is that what happened to you?" He didn't answer directly. "I made certain promises to myself as a boy, Lily, about the kind of man I would become. About the things I would never allow to happen if I had the power to prevent them." He refilled my wineglass without asking. "I have that power now." There was something hypnotic about his voice, about the way he spoke of power as a tool rather than a privilege. I found myself leaning forward, drawn into his narrative despite my reservations. "And your brother?" I asked. "What happened to him?" A shuddered look came over Alexander's face. "Enough about my past. Tell me about Emma. What does she love? What makes her smile?" The abrupt change of subject was jarring, but I allowed it, sensing a boundary I shouldn't cross. Instead, I told him about Emma. Her fascination with marine biology, her collection of seashells from the one beach trip we'd managed 2 summers ago, her serious nature that occasionally broke into infectious giggles. "She sounds remarkable," he said when I finished. "You've done well with her, despite the challenges. She makes it easy. She's—" I searched for the right words. "She's the best of me." Alexander nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Children often are. Do you have any?" I asked, realizing I knew almost nothing about his current life, only fragments of his past. "No." The word held a finality that suggested the subject was as closed as the topic of his brother. We finished our meal in a strangely comfortable silence. Afterward, he led me to the living area with its wall of windows overlooking the city. The view was breathtaking. The grid of streets, the ribbons of moving lights from cars, the patches of darkness that marked parks and the river beyond. "Beautiful, isn't it?" he said, standing close enough that I could feel the heat from his body but not quite touching me. "It's like a different world up here," I murmured. "So far above everything. Is that how you see it? As separation?" He turned to face me, his expression thoughtful. "I see it as perspective, the ability to see patterns, connections that aren't visible from the ground. Is that why you brought me here? To give me perspective?" His lips curved slightly. "Perhaps. Or perhaps I simply wanted to share something beautiful with you." The sincerity in his voice was disarming. In that moment, it was difficult to reconcile this man, thoughtful, articulate, almost vulnerable in his honesty, with the shadowy figure who had orchestrated payments from my ex-husband and knew intimate details of my life without asking. "It's late," I said, suddenly aware of the time. "I should go home. My mother will need to leave for her shift soon." He nodded, not attempting to persuade me otherwise. "Of course." The ride back to my apartment was quiet, comfortable in a way I hadn't expected. Alexander sat beside me, occasionally pointing out buildings of interest as we passed. A restored theater from the 1920s, a restaurant owned by a chef he knew from Moscow, a park where classical music concerts were held in summer. When we arrived at my building, he walked me to the entrance as before. "Thank you for dinner," I said, keys in hand, "and for sharing about your mother. Thank you for the conversation." His voice was soft in the pre-dawn quiet. "The specialist appointment is still on Tuesday. I'll arrange for a car to take you and Emma." "That's not necessary." "Please," he interrupted. "Allow me this." The word still sounded awkward coming from him. A man clearly unaccustomed to asking rather than commanding. It was this, perhaps more than anything, that made me nod in acceptance. "All right." He reached out slowly, telegraphing his movement, and brushed a strand of hair from my face. His fingers were warm against my skin, the touch feather-light, yet somehow leaving a trail of heat in its wake. "Good night, Lily," he murmured, his hand dropping back to his side. "Good night," I whispered. I watched him walk back to the car, his powerful frame silhouetted against the streetlights. Only when the vehicle disappeared around the corner did I enter the building, my mind swirling with contradictions and questions. Tuesday arrived faster than I expected. The car Alexander sent was not the sleek SUV I'd come to associate with him, but a more modest sedan with a female driver who introduced herself as Irina. She was polite but not overly friendly, efficient in helping me secure Emma's booster seat and navigating the midday traffic to Northside Medical. Emma, dressed in her favorite blue dress with embroidered butterflies, clutched her backpack of activities tightly on her lap. "Is this doctor going to make my breathing better, Mommy?" "That's the hope, sweetheart," I said, smoothing her curls. "Dr. Abramson is very good at helping kids with asthma. Will it hurt?" "No, honey. He'll just want to talk to us and maybe listen to your lungs." She nodded solemnly. At 7, Emma had already experienced more medical procedures than most adults. She'd developed a stoic acceptance of doctors that broke my heart a little. The medical center was intimidatingly modern, all glass and steel, with a soaring atrium filled with natural light. At the pediatric pulmonology desk, the receptionist smiled warmly at Emma, then turned to me with a different sort of smile when I gave our names. "Ah, yes, Ms. Miller and Emma. Dr. Abramson is expecting you." She led us not to the usual waiting area, but directly to a private consultation room decorated with underwater murals. "The doctor will be with you shortly. Can I get you anything while you wait? Water? Coffee? Juice for this little lady?" Emma's eyes widened at the special treatment. "Apple juice, please." "Of course, sweetheart. And for you, Ms. Miller, water is fine, thank you." When the receptionist left, Emma explored the room, examining the colorful fish painted on the walls. "Mommy, look! They have a clownfish like Nemo." I smiled at her excitement, but my mind was racing. The deferential treatment, the private room. Alexander's influence was evident in every detail. How much had he paid for this? What strings had he pulled? Dr. Abramson arrived 15 minutes later, a tall man with a salt and pepper beard and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He introduced himself warmly, immediately kneeling to Emma's level to show her the stethoscope and explain how it worked. The consultation was thorough but gentle. Dr. Abramson reviewed Emma's medical history, asked insightful questions I'd never been asked before, and conducted several tests using equipment I hadn't seen in our regular clinic. Emma's case is not uncommon, he explained when my daughter was happily drawing at a small table across the room, headphones playing her favorite music so we could speak freely. But the standard treatments she's been receiving aren't optimal for her specific presentation. I'd like to try a different approach, a combination therapy that's shown excellent results in children with her particular subtype of asthma. He outlined a treatment plan that made my heart sink with its complexity, and undoubtedly, its cost. This all sounds wonderful, doctor, but I'm not sure my insurance. Everything has been arranged, Ms. Miller, he interrupted smoothly. A special program for promising cases like Emma's. All medications, follow-up visits, and even emergency care if needed are covered. I stared at him, wondering if he knew the real source of this special program, or if he was simply repeating what he'd been told. I see. The rest of the appointment passed in a blur of information, prescriptions, and care instructions. When we left 2 hours later, Emma clutched a new inhaler, a stuffed dolphin from the doctor, and a follow-up appointment card for the following month. I carried a thick folder of information and a mind heavy with conflicting emotions. In the car, Emma fell asleep almost immediately, exhausted from the excitement and attention. I watched the city pass by through the window, wondering what invisible threads now connected my life to Alexander's, and whether I should be fighting harder to sever them. My phone buzzed with a text message. Alexander, how was the appointment? I hesitated before responding. Me, thorough. Dr. Abramson seems excellent. He's changing her treatment plan, Alexander. And Emma? How did she find it? I glanced at my sleeping daughter, her face peaceful in a way it rarely was when she slept at home, always slightly labored by her condition, me. She liked the doctor, and the special treatment. Thank you for that. Alexander. It's what she deserves, what you both deserve, me. The special program covering everything. That's you, isn't it? Alexander. Does it matter? Emma will receive the care she needs. You won't need to worry about costs or coverage denials. Me. It matters to me. There was a longer pause before his next message. Alexander. Yes, I arranged it. No paperwork, no statements, no bills to your address. Just care for your daughter. Is that acceptable? I stared at the phone, at the simple question that wasn't simple at all. Was it acceptable to allow this man to insert himself so thoroughly into our lives? To accept help that came with strings I couldn't yet see? And yet, looking at Emma's peaceful face, the answer formed itself without conscious thought. Me. Yes. It's acceptable. But we need to talk about boundaries. Alexander. Of course. Dinner tonight? I'll come to you this time. The thought of Alexander in my small apartment, his expensive suit against my secondhand furniture, made me wince. Me. Not tonight. I need time to process everything, and Emma will want me to herself after today, Alexander. Tomorrow, then. I'll send a car at 8 after Emma is with your mother. It wasn't really a question, but this time I didn't mind the presumption as much. Me. Tomorrow, 8 o'clock. As we pulled up to my apartment building, I carefully gathered Emma in my arms, thanking Irina for the ride. The folder of medical information tucked under one arm, my sleeping daughter against my shoulder. I made my way slowly up the stairs, each step feeling like a choice. A step deeper into whatever web Alexander Volkov was weaving around us. In our apartment, I laid Emma on her bed, removing her shoes and covering her with her favorite blanket. She stirred slightly, mumbling something about dolphins before falling back into deep sleep. I stood watching her for a long moment, thinking about the new medications that might finally help her breathe freely, the specialist who had taken more time with her in one visit than her regular doctor had in years, the future that suddenly seemed less burdened by constant medical worries. All provided by a man I barely knew, whose business I didn't understand, whose interest in us remained a mystery wrapped in fragments of a painful past and glimpses of immense power. What am I doing, Emma? I whispered to my sleeping child. What am I getting us into? She slept on, peaceful and oblivious to the crossroads we stood at. Outside, the afternoon sun caught on something metallic across the street, the glint of a car window, perhaps, or the reflection from an apartment opposite. I closed the curtains, suddenly certain we were being watched, and equally certain that tomorrow night would change everything. The next evening, I stood in front of my small bathroom mirror, scrutinizing my reflection with an unfamiliar intensity. I'd spent my meager savings on a simple black dress from a department store. Nothing spectacular, but a definite step up from my usual jeans and sweaters. My hair, usually pulled back in a practical ponytail, fell in soft waves around my shoulders. "You look pretty, Mommy," Emma said from the doorway, her eyes wide. "Like a princess." I smiled, kneeling to her level. "Thank you, sweetie. Not quite a princess, but maybe a little better than usual." "Are you going on a date?" she asked with the directness only children possess. The question caught me off guard. "I'm having dinner with a friend." "Is it the friend who gave me the special inhaler?" She held up the device that had, remarkably, already eased her breathing noticeably after just one day. I hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, it is." Emma considered this with her characteristic seriousness. "I like him already," she declared. "He makes you smile more." Before I could form a response to this startling observation, a knock at the door announced my mother's arrival. She'd agreed to watch Emma with minimal questions, though the knowing look in her eyes told me I hadn't fooled her about the nature of tonight's dinner meeting. "Well, look at you," she said approvingly, taking in my appearance. "It's about time you remembered you're more than just Emma's mom." "Mom, it's not," I began, but she waved away my protest. "Don't spoil it with explanations. Just enjoy yourself for once." She shooed me toward the door. "Your mystery man texted me that the car is waiting. Go on." I kissed Emma goodbye, promising to tell her all about the dolphins painted on the restaurant ceiling. A harmless fiction to make my absence seem like a mundane event rather than the momentous step it felt like. The black sedan waited at the curb as promised, but when the rear door opened, I was surprised to find Alexander himself seated inside rather than waiting at a restaurant. "You came yourself?" I said, as I slid in beside him, immediately enveloped in the now familiar scent of his cologne. I wanted to. He studied me with open appreciation, his dark eyes lingering on my face before traveling down to take in the simple dress. "You look beautiful, Lily." The compliment, delivered with such sincerity, brought heat to my cheeks. "Thank you. Where are we going?" "I thought we might do something different tonight." He nodded to the driver, and the car pulled smoothly away from the curb. "How was Emma today?" "Better. Already better." I couldn't keep the wonder from my voice. "The new medication seems to be working. She went the whole day without using her rescue inhaler. That hasn't happened in, I don't even remember how long." Satisfaction settled on his features. "Good. Dr. Abramson is the best in his field. He'll have her breathing normally within a month." "Thank you," I said quietly. "For all of it. The appointment, the medications. I can't deny what a difference it's already making." He nodded, accepting my gratitude without false modesty. "You wanted to discuss boundaries." Direct, as always. I took a deep breath, gathering my thoughts. "Yes. This arrangement between us. I need to understand what you want from me, what you expect. Is it so difficult to believe I simply want to help?" A hint of amusement colored his voice. "Yes, actually. People don't just help strangers without expecting something in return. Especially people with your kind of resources." His expression sobered. "Fair enough." He seemed to choose his next words carefully. "I meant what I said about recognizing something of my mother in you, but there's more to it than that." The car turned onto the highway, heading out of the city. Through the windows, I watched as urban sprawl gave way to more open spaces, trees silhouetted against the darkening sky. "I've built a life based on calculated decisions, Lily. Risk assessment, cost-benefit analysis. The business I'm in requires nothing less." He spoke carefully, each word measured. "But seeing you that night with Emma, it triggered something unexpected. An impulse to intervene that wasn't calculated at all." "And now?" I pressed. "Is this still impulse, or have we become one of your business decisions?" His lips curved slightly, a bit of both, perhaps. I've come to value your presence in my life. You barely know me. I know enough. His certainty was both flattering and unnerving. I know you work yourself to exhaustion for your daughter. I know you refuse to be bitter about your ex-husband's abandonment. I know you remember Mr. Grayson's preference for extra olives and make small gestures of kindness even when you're tired and worried. He leaned slightly closer. I know that beneath the exhaustion and stress is a woman of remarkable strength and beauty. The intensity in his gaze made my heart beat faster. And what do you want from that woman? Your company. Your conversation. His voice dropped lower. Eventually. Perhaps more. But only when you're ready. Only what you're willing to give. The car slowed, turning onto a private road that wound up a hillside. Through the trees, I glimpsed lights and what appeared to be a large structure. Where are we? I asked, momentarily distracted. One of my properties. A place I thought you might appreciate. The car emerged from the trees into a clearing dominated by what I could only describe as a modern castle. Glass and stone rising organically from the hillside, its windows glowing warmly against the twilight sky. A reflecting pool mirrored the structure, doubling its impressive presence. This is yours? I breathed, unable to hide my awe. One of several properties, yes. But this one is special to me. I designed much of it myself. The driver opened my door, and Alexander guided me toward the entrance with a light touch at my elbow. Inside, the space opened dramatically. Soaring ceilings, walls of glass framing the spectacular view of the city lights below. Furnishings that managed to be both luxurious and inviting. It's beautiful, I said honestly. Come. He led me through the main space to doors that opened onto a vast terrace. There, a table was set for two, candles flickering in glass hurricanes. The city spread out below us like a carpet of jewels. As we sat, servers appeared silently, pouring wine and presenting the first course. I recognized none of the dishes by name, but each was more delicious than the last, flavors both foreign and comforting, presented with artistic precision. You still haven't fully answered my question, I said between courses. About boundaries, about what you expect from me. Alexander set down his glass. I expect nothing you're not willing to give. But I want to be part of your life, Lily. Yours and Emma's. He held my gaze steadily. I want to ensure you both have everything you need. The medical care, yes. But beyond that, education for Emma at the finest schools. A home in a safe neighborhood. Freedom from the constant struggle that's been wearing you down. The offer hung in the air between us, breathtaking in its scope. And in return, your trust, your company. His eyes darkened. Eventually, your heart. But I'm a patient man. I can wait. And if I couldn't quite finish the thought. Then Emma still gets the care and education. You still get security, I told you. Not everything is a transaction. I studied him. This enigmatic man who had upended my carefully constructed life in less than a week. Who are you really, Alexander? What do you do that allows you such generosity? Something shifted in his expression, a decision being made. I told you I'm in import, export, real estate, private lending. All true. What I didn't specify is that my businesses operate in spaces where traditional banks and institutions fear to tread. I provide services to those who cannot access them through conventional means. You're talking about illegal activities, I said quietly. I'm talking about a world with different rules than the one you've known. He leaned forward. I won't insult your intelligence by pretending my hands are clean, Lily. But know this, I have lines I don't cross. I don't deal in human trafficking. I don't target the innocent. I don't harm children or women. My mouth had gone dry. But you do harm others, when necessary. He didn't flinch from the truth. The world is rarely black and white. Most live in the gray spaces between. I should have been terrified, should have made excuses and fled back to my small apartment, my struggling but honest life. Instead, I found myself asking, why tell me this now? Because you deserve the truth before making any decisions, because trust requires honesty. He reached across the table, his hand covering mine, and because I want you to know exactly who is offering you protection. His hand was warm, strong, the touch sending currents of electricity up my arm. "A dangerous man," I whispered. "Yes." No denials. No pretense. Dangerous to my enemies, protective of what's mine. His thumb traced small circles on my wrist. "I would never harm you or Emma, Lily. Never allow anyone else to harm you either." The conviction in his voice was absolute. And in that moment, I believed him completely. Whether that made me a fool or simply human, I wasn't sure. "I need time," I said finally, "to think about all this, to decide what's best for Emma and me." He nodded, withdrawing his hand. "Of course." The rest of the meal passed in conversation about safer topics. Books we'd read, places he'd traveled, Emma's passion for marine life. By the time dessert was served, a delicate confection of chocolate and raspberries, I'd almost forgotten the weight of the decision awaiting me. Almost. As we prepared to leave, Alexander led me to a different part of the house, opening a door to reveal what could only be described as a child's paradise. A bedroom decorated in ocean themes, with a custom-built loft bed shaped like a ship, bookshelves filled with titles about sea creatures, and a state-of-the-art air purification system discreetly built into the walls. "For Emma," he said simply, "if you decide to accept my offer." I touched the soft bedspread, fingered the spine of a book about dolphins, looked out the window at the view that any child would adore. "And for me?" I asked, turning to face him. He stepped closer, his presence filling the room. "Whatever you want, Lily. A home, security, freedom from worry." His voice lowered. "And this." Slowly, deliberately, he leaned down and pressed his lips to mine. The kiss was gentle at first, questioning. But when I didn't pull away, it deepened. His hand coming up to cup my face with unexpected tenderness. When we parted, I was breathless, my heart racing. His dark eyes had softened, showing vulnerability I hadn't glimpsed before. "That's my offer," he said quietly. "All of it. Protection, care, and this, whatever grows between us, at whatever pace feels right." I stood at the precipice of a choice that would change everything, the comfortable certainty of struggle versus the unknown territory of protection by a dangerous man who looked at me as though I were precious. "Take me home," I whispered. "I need to think." He nodded, respecting my request without question. The drive back to my apartment was quiet, his hand holding mine loosely on the seat between us, allowing me to withdraw if I wished. I didn't. At my door, he kissed me again, briefly, but with a promise of more. "Take whatever time you need, Lily. I'll be waiting." 3 days later, as Emma slept peacefully in her bed, breathing easily for the first time in years, I made my decision. I reached for my phone and typed a simple message. Yes. For Emma, for myself, for whatever this becomes between us. Yes. His response came instantly, as though he'd been waiting by the phone. "I'll send a car tomorrow. Pack what matters to you both. The rest can be replaced." And just like that, I stepped from one life into another, from struggle to protection, from loneliness to belonging, from fear to a different kind of uncertainty, into the arms of a dangerous man who looked at me and my daughter as though we were treasures to be guarded at all costs. It should have frightened me, this leap into the unknown. Instead, as I looked at Emma's peaceful, sleeping face, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Hope.